Hey, welcome everyone. I'm happy to have yet another episode with a very special guest. I've known him for years. He is local to the Twin Cities area, but I will let him introduce in a moment. But the topic for today is unpacking if you could start over one thing, or if you could start over, what would you unlearn? We often talk about what we would learn if we could start over. It could be new skills, it could be new tools, it could be new mindsets. But today we are going to flip it. We are going to flip the question, flip the usual question, which we often ask: What did you learn along the way? But maybe more powerful question is: What did you unlearn? Because real growth often happens not when we add more, but when we let go of old habits, fixed beliefs, or the rules we once thought defined success. So today, I have the guest who has seen leadership evolve across industries, who embodies this idea of continuous reflection. Dan, why don't you introduce yourself and we can dive into the topic?
Yeah, thanks, Renan. It's really a pleasure to be invited onto your show. I've seen a number of the episodes, and I think it's a really great way to engage with the community. So, Dan Abdul, been in technology my entire career, but predominantly in healthcare technology. So, I've led in the tech space and then up until the operations space as well in different organizations. And then most currently, I have moved into leading Aubrant Digital, which is a global custom software firm. We focus on bespoke software, cloud engineering, and data and AI for enterprise customers. So yeah, thanks
Yeah,
for having
nice.
me.
Yeah, good to have you as part of the show, Dan. I want to probably start with this. Most of us enter our careers holding on to certain truths. We think they are non-negotiables. It could be you learn something over the period of time, or you could have learned from your previous managers. You know, things like if you just work hard enough, everything will fall into place, or leaders should always have all the answers. But over time, experience has a funny way of humbling us, right? That is true. And I've seen this. I'm sure you might have seen this, showing that maybe those beliefs are not always true, right? I'll give you an example. I've always heard people, including myself, right? I experienced this. Once you believe that, in control will make you strong, but until you discover that, letting go that control and trusting others actually build more impact, right? So if you let go and if you trust on others, if you trust on teams, then you will see more impact. So I'm curious to know, was there a similar moment for you, a point where life or leadership challenged one of your core beliefs and changed the way how you show up?
Yes, I think that's a powerful question. It's much easier for us to talk about things we've learned along the way. It's a lot more challenging to talk about things that we have unlearned along the way. I think one of the things I had to learn early in my management career when I went from technical to management was the belief that your success is primarily driven by what you know or your call it your technical abilities, whatever the technical function of your job is. If I simply just do that a little bit better, then that was the path to success. And as a result of that, people focus on that drive what you focus on. If your goal is to be successful. Um, Thanks to a leader I had in the past, I had to very quickly unlearn that and realize, particularly when you transition to the management party, has very little to do what you as an individual know, because that doesn't scale. It really becomes, you know, how you put together a team and how you leverage those around you, whether or not you're leading a team from a functional standpoint, but who's around you, how do you take advantage of that in a positive way to execute on whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah, 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 true. It's fascinating. Like a lot of times we feel like, we want to sit down and see what is that we could unlearn, right? It's not similar to how we want to learn things, right? You sit down uh, for a period of time and if you want to learn new things, but you cannot do the same thing when you want to like unlearn new things or unlearn certain things. Um,
Yeah,
Unlearning rarely happens in calm moments, right? Usually shows up through friction. Those times what used to work suddenly doesn't work anymore. It will frustrate people. Maybe it's a way of managing people or how you define success. Oftentimes, I've seen this in with many people who said they used to equate control with competence, but they wanted to be involved in everything, every decision. But as their team grows, the same mindset started limiting them and even frustrating others, right? Um, I've gone through that similar themes. But was there a time when you realized that something that once served you, a belief, or it could be a habit, or it could be a mindset, was now getting in the way of your growth or your relationship? What did that moment of realization look like for you, Dan?
yeah. I think this might sound maybe not obvious to folks more in the technology space, but I think I used to think of myself as extremely analytical, and if you give me a problem, you sort of break it down into logical chunks, and that's how you go about it. I think about several years, well, several decades now, I was in a global ERP implementation. And, those things are gnarly, they're, scary, they're complex. And so, I spend a lot of times, thinking about it logically. How do I break this down? What are my like keywords and things like that, right? And, for my learning, for my previous learning, that was the path to success.
Yeah,
And to your point, one of the things you have to do at some point to unlearn something is really you have to reflect and say, what assumptions do I have or what beliefs do I have that are actually not working for me?
sure.
Right. As we say, to hit roadblocks, that was one of the exercises I was forced to do. And it was the realization, most people that have done these types of major delivery initiatives learned very quickly that
Yeah,
what needed to be in that period was a very effective salesperson. And what I mean by that is, yes, it was definitely a place for the analytical and the logical thinking, but it was about being able to bring people along, being able to drive compromise, right? Because you possibly implement it in a way that everyone gets what they want. And things like that are way more of an art than a science. So if you have more of a science background like myself, that can be very difficult sort of to unlearn, where it's you almost just want to be able to write a formula on the board that says, okay, if I get this formula, it will equal success. No, you're now in a realm that it's about people, it's about art, it's about a relationship,
yep.
right? And sort of learning the logic or the logical way of thinking about it. I think that was a very big moment for me. But once I started to embrace that more and more, I just saw a lot of the roadblocks disappear.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part, right, Dan? Like you mentioned learning the logical way, think in a logical
Yeah,
way. That doesn't come naturally, but probably as you go through your experience and journey, you will get it. But a lot of times we think about early in our career, success often looks like adding more and more on your plate. It could
exactly.
be more credentials, it could be more projects, more recognition, more of everything, right? We've been told we are told that growth means constantly doing and achieving things. That is what growth means. But it takes a lot of experience and a lot of maturity to realize, okay, it's not about always adding something to it. It's about being intentional in what you do, right? That takes some time,
Yeah,
right? That has to change your habit. You have to change your habits. You have to change your mindset. um, Was there a point in your journey where you realized that, okay, hey, it's not, the success is not about, okay, not to get to a C level, not to add more things or land grab things. It means, sometimes it means subtraction, not just addition, right? What was that moment in your journey?
Yeah, you know, I think I used a different term when it dawned on me. I used more of the term of focus, right? And if you think about focus, right, you have to subtract some things. You have to move things out of the way, right? And for me, it was really, as I would say, probably around the uh, director level. And then, I really thought about, well, there's a lot of places, that my career could go. And so, what do I really want to do? What do I really want to be good at? And that will allow me more focus, right? And I think once I started doing that and really saying, look, what I'm innately good at is delivery, right? There are other things that, it's great to be good at. And I had the ability to combine that delivery with
Right.
strategy,
Right.
right? So that just put focus on, how you can effectively connect strategy to delivery. And that was sort of call it the focused area that I drilled into, as I wanted to continue to grow in my career. And so I wasn't really focused on, oh, there's this additional uh, certification or tooling I need to go learn how to do, or I had to go get experience in this other things. I was really thinking about what would make me better in driving strategy to delivery and hyper focus on that. Right.
Right.
And
Right.
it all to be when you're in a conversation around whether it's your strengths or your experience and things like that, you can speak in a little more depth about, the areas where you're focused in. Now, what you give away is sort of like this breadth of other things. It doesn't mean you don't have the experience there and you have paid attention there, right? But I go back to, well, that's where you leverage the people around you to make it
Yeah.
more solid,
Yep.
right?
Yep. I think the focus is the key word here. Tying back to the focus, and I talked about, you cannot sit for some time and think about what you want to unlearn, right? Probably, I'm going to
Yeah.
put you on spot, Dan. Like, if you rewind yourself 15 years ago, 10 years ago, right? Oftentimes we feel some lessons in our careers are easy to learn, but the hardest ones are the often ones we have to unlearn, right? But it's the hardest one. I'll share my example. People always think that hard work really means coming first to the office and then leaving late, or the last one in the from the office. That's not the hard work, but some people are being stamped that way. Like, if you sit in front of the computer for 16 hours, people think like, you're a hardworking individual, but the focus is what matters, like you said. There are a lot of hardest professional truth you had to unlearn, right? Some people will believe that this is truth, like you need to sit. Hard work means you need to sit in front of the computer and constantly read and learn. But that's not true, right? But what was the hardest professional truth for you? Like, if you rewind yourself 10, 15 years ago, what is that you had to unlearn? That's something you always believed in, or that you always held on to for a long time.
Well, I think it's hard to narrow it down to one thing I learned. I mean, as you're asking that question, I'm thinking around two or three different things, but maybe one area that might go down just because it was really impactful for me is sort
Yeah.
of learning what I saw as my strength and my ability,
Mhm.
right? Um, so the way I really landed on this, I need to focus in on strategy and delivery, wasn't really just by accident or just sitting down at some point. It was really, I came from, computer science undergrad, heavily science focused. I was, writing software. I mean, I was joke with my teams nowadays that first language I used to program in was Fortran, and That eats you the minute you start talking about that, right? But I actually, at a point in my career, suffered a very traumatic brain injury. And one of the things that was greatly impacted was my ability to write software. However, one of the things I realized as I was re-engaging in the workforce was the the core delivery things, right? I was still, if anything, I could see those from a different light. And it is shocking when you identified yourself as something and then you realize that you can't do it, right?
Yes.
Or maybe it doesn't come as naturally anymore. So I really had to unlearn what this identity I had of myself was, right? And a number of things I did after that, right? I went back, got my MBA, really focused on the connection between strategy and delivery because that's where I'd seen a lot of friction points.
Right.
Everyone could come up with a strategy and throw it out there and say, "Hey, look at this really beautiful strategy." Very few people can take complex strategies and build something that works right. So once I truly sort of let go of, no, Dan, you're not the individual that's going to write the code. You're not the
Yes.
individual that's going to. However, you can be this, right? I actually felt like my career just went on supercharge once I did that. But the only way I was able to do it is to let go of what I thought made me, you know, a useful employee to an organization.
Right.
Right.
Right. Right. And Dan, I think I'm sure you might have noticed this. I came from a technology background. I'm sure you also came from a technology background. Like when we started our careers, right? We always been um, we have this notion of like we are the problem solvers. For every problem we have to find a solution, and we've been brought that way, right? Because we started with coding and then got into
Yeah.
architecture, solving problems. But once you become a leader, right, you have to let that go. There are moments like where you just look at the problem and you are like, yep, I can solve this, I want to say the solution to it, but you have to hold that back, right? It's very hard to do,
Yeah.
right? It's very hard to not get yourself involved in architecture, not get involved in your problem solving, right? When there is a real problem solving that needs to happen, right?
Yeah.
I'm still learning about how to keep myself away
Yeah.
from those, right? I, I, I'm curious, like what are some of the tricks and tips that you can share, like to keep one, you being the leader, not to get into that problem solving skills, you being the leader, not to try to solve the solution, to give the solutions to the team, right? How do you do that?
Yeah. A, it's a continual journey of learning because, for me, it's not just, okay, I'm not the one that's going to solve the actual technical challenge, but it's what problem am I going to solve? Because at the end of the day, everyone on the team is solving
Mm-hmm.
some type of or another for it to be effective. Or else, if you're not solving any problems, you have to question why you're on that team.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all to the CEO. So I think it's about not just saying what are you going to take off your plate, but what does that create space for? So a couple of things that I would say to my teams now is, a key part of my role is to look across our organization and how our teams function together to deliver what our customers want, right? That's a big part of, call it the problem that I solve, right? So I'm constantly thinking about, okay, here's how we've done this, with this customer or that customer, like how do we take it to the next level? And, it's usually not saying, well, okay, I'm going to turn around and write a different software that could do it better, but rather, going back to sort of that strategy meets delivery where you leverage the people around you saying, how do I solve the people problem? Because quite frankly, as you probably know, in the world of high tech, the most challenging problem is not technology, it's the people, right?
Yep.
The technology
Yep.
is hyper predictable. if you don't leverage the people around you effectively, or you don't engage the right ways with the consumers of your technology, that's where you run into problems. So I look at it as that's a problem that I need to focus on and solve. And if I'm spending my time there, I'll have less time to, start getting into my engineer's way. But let's be clear, once in a while, I still enjoy geeking out. So, but I was telling him, I just need some time to geek out. And they're like, yeah, that's fine, Dan.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
What I
yeah.
love about this conversation, Dan, is, it's not only um, allowing us to process what we went through. It's also a good reminder for us. Like, growth is not just about what we pick up along the way. It is also about what, we have to be brave enough to let something go, brave enough to put down. Unlearning takes humility, patience, and self awareness. I think that comes through experience and maturity. It also, depending on what questions you ask to yourself, what is that you want to unlearn. Maybe the best part of unlearning is, create some space, make some space for new ideas, for empathy, or for better ways of leading, right? Again, thanks, Dan. I know you are busy, and when I reached out to you, you readily accepted the invite, and I'm glad that you're part of the show. I'm grateful that you're part of the show. Thanks for sharing your reflections
Yeah.
and your honesty, Dan. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. This is, a great show. And I love the fact that I was able to be part of it. And, I look forward to future episodes.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Thanks.